Only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWS.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sitdown Morning Show with Malik Wright, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-host as always, Daniel Alameda, Jimmy on the ones and twos. We have a special guest joining us, and Parker Blake as always, and we have Michael Hara joining us on the show. Before we jump into all that, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, I want to start with the news that caught everybody by surprise. Bill Belichick signs with UNC to be their next head football coach. I have a lot of thoughts to give on that, but it wouldn't be a show if I didn't bring our guy Parker Blake in early. Parker Blake, what's going on, man?
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. It's going really good. I wanted to get your thoughts as well as Daniel's thoughts on Bill Belichick signing with UNC. I certainly have a lot to get into regarding that, but Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, I think it was a shock to me. I think we saw the news and I was like, this ain't true, man. He's got to go to the NFL, right? He's got to go after that head coaching record. And it turns out, day after day, it became more real. And then he wanted more stipulations in his contract. And I still wasn't believing it. I was saying, no, man, there's no way. This dude wants to coach in the NFL. And it just leads me to believe, and this is just my biggest takeaway from this, it leads me to believe he wants something different, right? I think that when he can look at his NFL career, he might just be looking at his hand and saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 championships. And he may be happy. He may look at his legacy and say, hey, I don't want to mess anything up. That's how I want to leave it. And for him, if that's what he wants, and go after, and maybe he wants to leave a legacy in college football. Maybe he wants to go after something that doesn't have the pressures of an NFL front office. It doesn't have the pressure of winning year over year over year in an NFL that is so fluid, especially if you don't have the luxury of having a star quarterback like a Tom Brady. So I think that it's something that he truly wants to do. And I think that's the biggest takeaway with the recent things that he's done, whether it's, go on these podcasts or go on the Manning cast or go on the Pat McAfee show. Everything he's been doing has been a jolt of new life and a jolt of energy for him. So I don't know, Parker, that's kind of what I took away from this, is looking at it saying, hey, he wants to build a legacy at North Carolina. And this is something that it hits home to him, right? His dad was an assistant coach at North Carolina. I believe, he's got strong ties to the school. So I think that this is a legacy thing for him, as well as something that he wants something new. He wants a new challenge. And that's just my biggest takeaways from this. But Park, what do you think about the Belichick news?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's anything he's trying to do to make himself look better. I think it's really just him saying, "Oh, I want to give this a shot. See what it's all about." There's a lot of conversation around, the modern era of college football and what that means and what that all entails. And I feel like he kind of just wants to give it a go. A lot of people keep talking about how similarly college football is now operating to the NFL as far as, personnel management and, all the nuance that goes along with that. And remember what people were talking about with Bill as far as being a head coach candidate was that he wanted all the control and that he wanted, to be very involved in how the organization was operating. But as a head football coach in college football, that's kind of what you do. I know they're expanding those offices nowadays, but he can go in there and he can kind of be that guy that's in there and calling the shots and kind of changing or, directing where they're going down there at UNC. And I think it's going to be really fun to watch personally. I think people are discounting how he's going to be received. I think a lot of people are, oh, well, what does he know about recruiting? What does he know? He's not going to be able to talk to these kids. But he's going to garner a lot of respect, not only because of the name. I know a lot of people keep talking about well, do the kids even know who Bill Belichick is anymore? Like, I mean, he was so long ago when he was in his heyday. But when you can pull out 6 Super Bowl rings, when you can talk about the connections you have to the NFL, I mean, kids are going to want to go to UNC because of the network, and then everyone that goes to that program is going to have instant, NFL eyes on them, whether it's from the media perspective of just hyping guys up because of those connections, or it's just guys that are going to be able to be in the building more often, or that are going to be able to call Bill Belichick on players. Like, there's a lot of value that he's going to bring to a program, and I'm personally excited to see how it goes. Whether it goes good or bad, I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I'm excited to watch it.
No, for sure. And another thing, and once again, we appreciate everybody watching. If you guys have any comments, drop them down below. Gary Jellison, our guy, said, what confuses me is Belichick didn't like playing rookies. Now he wants to deal with 19 and 20-year-olds. I think that this is a shift, and you would be right saying that his whole relationship with rookies was very rocky. He was very cut and dry. But I feel like this is a challenge that he knows what the issues are going to be with this. He knows he's not dealing with 25. He's not dealing with grown men anymore. He's dealing with kids who are now developing for the first time. And I think that he understands the challenge. And for me, another thing, Parker, is when we discuss UNC, I think this move has a very similar impact to what Deion Sanders had with Colorado. And I think that this is kind of the new wave. And for anybody who's discounting the, UNC Tar Heels, I just really challenge you to go look at what their boosters did, right? NIL is a huge thing now. They went from a $4 million cap with NIL money to a $20 million cap in NIL money. That is up over 4 times as much, 5 times as much. And for me, that alone shows me what this program is about to turn into. That alone shows me what the expectation is. And not only what the expectation is, but this ain't like the NFL anymore. This is a clear difference of ball game for the organization, for UNC. And so for me, when I saw that, I said their cap was $4 million. Now they got $20 million. They got enough money to afford the top 4 recruits in this upcoming year's, recruiting class. So for me, that was a huge shock. But what are your thoughts on the Deion comparison, as well as just how much money that they're investing and saying, hey, because Bill Belichick is coming here? And it's the same thing also. There was a guy who was in the transfer portal. I forgot his name, but he's an offensive lineman. And as soon as it was announced, he took his name out of the transfer portal and he posted, he said, hey, I'm back. So I think Bill Belichick's going to have a huge impact here. Parker, what do you say?
Yeah, no, I mean, the booster fund that these schools are able to put together is always something that's very interesting to watch. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to use it as kind of a gauge for how serious the school is. Like, if you're actively increasing that and like trying to be competitive in that realm, it's like, oh wow, like they're out here trying to improve the team and this and that. But if you're not, it's always like, oh well, they've just given up and yada yada. But it's always interesting to watch that. But I don't disagree with the Deion effect. However, I don't think we'll see the same mass exodus of players as he gets into the building and everything gets going. I don't think we'll see that end of it. I think it'll be more just these higher end recruits being interested in a UNC, or these transfer portal guys being interested in a UNC. I don't think we'll see a lot of guys head out of there and try and go find a different spot because they don't feel like they're gonna fit. I think a lot of people are kind of I think there's gonna be a lot of the same mindset around college football where it's like, I kind of want to be a part of this for at least a year or two. I want to see what this is going to be like. And then if it's not good, I have the portal, or I'll be out of eligibility, whatever the situation might be. But I think a lot of people are going to at least want to take a glance at what this situation looks like and feels like, because, is he going to try and bring, the Patriot way to the Tar Heels, or is it going to be a new Bill Belichick? And I think that's what there's some people that think that it's going to be Bill trying to be the old Bill, but some people believe we're going to get a whole new version of Bill Belichick that I'm just interested to see. So again, there's just so much like going on around it that is kind of just unknown right now. I mean, who's he going to bring in on his staff? Like there's a lot going on with that right now. And I personally, if I was a player involved, I just want to be there just to watch what happens.
Yes.
To be honest with you.
And the final thing I'll say on this is I'm with you. And I think with the whole Deion thing too, I think this is a huge positive, whichever way you slice it, for their program.
For sure.
And I think you're right. If I put myself in the shoes of a player, god damn it, I want to experience that. And I really
Yeah.
struggle to see how a Bill Belichick doesn't change their culture and doesn't raise the intensity for whether he brings the Patriot way or it's a new era. Regardless, this dude is going to garner respect. And I think that is the bottom line from the players, from the organization. I feel like the organization is also going to say, hey, Bill, it's all on you. And I think that that's a positive thing. And whether he's here for 6 more years or whether he's here for only 3 years, I think that this program is going to be massively changed. And I'm just curious to see the talent and how they develop. And even heading into the draft, too, what the eyeballs are on these guys in the future. So I'm excited to see him.
I just don't personally get the comparison to Dion and Bill for me, for instance.
Really?
I don't. I don't think that Dion attracted like a bunch of superstars to Colorado when he was there. I think that if you ask me, the mission Dion was on was to make sure Shador had a stable college career and a real shot at being a first-round pick and a franchise changer at quarterback position. It just so happened that he also, before that, was able to land a Travis Hunter where he was before, and Travis Hunter followed him along there. And, Travis Hunter turned into this great football player that everyone expected him to be. It was impressive that Dion was able to flip the number 1 recruit in the country, right? Yeah. And Travis Hunter to follow him. And I think I give him credit in that regards, but I feel like Bill Belichick is definitely more built for the long haul. I don't feel like Deion Sanders is built long for college football. I thought his mission was his son and Travis, and the mission has been pretty much completed. I look at what Bill Belichick has done. Bill Belichick is, I look at Bill Belichick, and he wants to make sure his son is a future coach in waiting. But even more so, what attracts Bill Belichick to a UNC job is the landscape of college football has changed so much. It has become very similar to a NFL. It has. There is so much money involved with these players now, and I saw tweets even after the season. Well, this school came to a deal with such and such, and this player is staying in school, and it's like, for me, I look at it and I say, Bill Belichick is probably going to be able to build something pretty sustainable here and a proven method. What's going to attract people to Carolina and Dada D, we're not getting into that. I simply just made a statement. The 2 stars of that team are Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter. There's nothing to debate there. For me, Bill Belichick is going to get guys that are interested in obviously playing at the next level, because you have a chance to play with a 6-time proven Super Bowl head coach. That's the one caveat here. So think about long-term what this does for a program, right? Like North Carolina. If you want to look for a comparable comparison, for me, look at what Jim Harbaugh did with Michigan.
Yeah.
I think that's the proper one. People wanted to go there because they knew he had success in the NFL. They knew he had proven success in the NFL. And they knew that he was a direct pipeline because of how long he was in the league, the relationships he built. He knew that, the players knew that if they aligned themselves with Harbaugh, they'd have a realistic shot at playing at the next level, which is why we saw Michigan, through those years that Harbaugh was there, have some of the most first and second round picks that came out of the University of Michigan. That's why. That's the impact there. That's the thought process there. And for me, I look at what Bill did in the NFL, and this is a little bit of a shock because from everyone internally, everyone thought that he would be interested in coaching in the NFL again because he wanted that record. He wanted that prestigious record. I think Bill's going to have success at UNC. Will it happen in year 1? I don't know. But the one thing that these players are going to learn when they go with him, right, is offense, defense, and special teams. Yeah. Right? They're going to understand that all 3 phases matter at football. And you want to talk about coming into a program at UNC, we're dealing with some of the most, you're going to probably deal with some of the most disciplined players, one of the more disciplined teams. And that's that's the biggest thing that gets missed in college football. Right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the biggest thing that gets misconstrued in college football is that, you know, the discipline aspect. Why did Nick Saban have so much success through the years? Why did Nick Saban have so much success through the years? And it's because his teams were disciplined. It's because his teams prepared like professional teams. His teams understood what it was like to be game ready. You know where Nick Saban also coached? The NFL. So there's a method to the madness there. And we talk a lot about these coaches in the NFL. The college jobs are becoming even more attractive because of the money that's being allotted to them and because the game has changed to that degree. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more work, in my opinion, with the recruitment. But I think for a guy like Bill Belichick, you're not going to even really have to deal with the strenuous schedule of said recruiting. You even see some players who said that they were entering the transfer portal for UNC now say, hey, I'm staying at UNC. So it shows the impact Bill's going to have with said team. And I want to get to some of Dottie's comments. Deion has more star power than Bill. Players will go there as well. What are you talking about? Deion won't be there after this year. That's my thought process. And star power is fine, but proven success track record is a whole different ballgame if you want to compete for championships. That's what Bill Belichick is all about. You said Jimmy Horn and Wester will play on Sundays. I agree they will play. And then you said that safety Colorado has going is going to get drafted. What safety? Like, that's my point. Like, we're talking about stars that Deion has recruited. He does have some very good players at the University of Colorado, but you can't even name the safety's name, is my point. The two mainstays on that team that we know are Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. We obviously know Shiloh.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously know Jimmy Horn Jr. because he's one of his receivers that he's throwing to.
Yeah.
But let's not get carried away and act like he has this absolute powerhouse of a team. He doesn't. He's built a very good team. One thing that I give him credit for is they really went out there and they got talent on the offensive line to show that they could compete in their conference, because that was an issue for them the first year. But that's just my thoughts. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the difference, and I'm with you, I think the biggest difference is Bill seems more bought in than Deion. And I will totally, it seems like Deion's going to be checked out, right? It doesn't seem like Deion's going to be there. It seems like this was a quick turnaround. And I think that's the biggest difference. Bill comes in also, I believe, with much more respect and immediately with, hey, this dude has done it before. The thing and the point I think I was trying to make with that is I think we do see an immediate turnaround. Like, I look at Colorado, they were 1-11.
Let me just ask a question. Yeah. Dottie D, respectfully, I'm not trying to be a jerk. You know my track record, brother. You know me, I never say anything just to say things. What makes you think I would step up on my show several times, and I've been consistent since September, and talk about Deion Sanders not being at the University of Colorado? Come on, brother. We've been doing this a long time. Deion has not stated, because Deion's not going to tell his players that, hey, I'm leaving. But Deion has real interest within the NFL. There are teams that are interested in Deion Sanders in some capacity, whether that's coaching or being a part of that organization. I guarantee you Deion Sanders will not be the head coach of Colorado next year. I will guarantee you that. Daniel, continue.
Yeah, and I think that's where, when you look at the turnaround that they had for me, I just don't know if Deion is fully bought in. And we can have an honest conversation too. Deion can look at his time with Colorado and say that was a success. He can look at the boosters. They can look at him. The organization can look at him. The entire fan base can look at him and say, hey, you helped us change the organization. We were a 1-11 football team before you. We're a 9-3 football team now. You had the most transfers out of anybody in college football, 10 more than anybody else this past year. You helped our team. And I think that that's where Deion was a huge help to them. But I just don't see the real path for him to stay there. And I think that this is a consistent trend with him. Look at where he was before he was at Colorado. He was with his son coaching. And I think that I really struggle to see him staying in Colorado after his son moves on to the NFL, after Travis Hunter moves on to the NFL, because Deion has said many times he is going to do something out of the norm. He is going to make sure his 2 dudes get to where they need to go in the NFL. So that's what I think. And I don't think that we're wrong to have that discussion about Deion Sanders not
He
being
has
at
shown no
Colorado.
interest in any other players. Like, but again, mine isn't coming off of speculation. This comes from people that I talk to on a regular basis. Like that's just what it is. The fact of the matter is his mission is complete, right? His son gets drafted, in the first round, ideally probably to the Raiders. We'll see where Travis Hunter winds up, and then he moves on elsewhere. The fact of the matter is he also put Colorado to be in a situation in which they still would have a pipeline to the NFL because they're connected to him. Because ideally, someone from his staff is probably going to take over as the head coach if he were to leave, of course, assuming, or so my thought process is we'll see what happens with Deion, but the focus needs to be back on Bill Belichick. I thought this was a good get for UNC and their program moving forward. A lot of people are too hyper focused on the age of Bill Belichick and not focused enough on the results. That's just my thought process. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. And we'll see what happens with the whole Bill Belichick thing and UNC moving forward. Parker, is there anything else that you want to add? I know we kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, you're good. I think, honestly, just back to the Deion conversation for a second, I think there's a difference. I think a lot of people get it twisted a little bit, that there is a difference between having stars at the college football level and having guys in your team that are going to play on Sundays. Stars are a very limited few players, if there are any, across the college football landscape. Having guys that play on Sundays can mean a wide range of things. Even there's NFL guys that'll draft players that are saying this is kind of a shot in the dark. We like this upside, but we don't necessarily know what we're gonna get out of this guy. So I mean, I can't saying that a team has players that will play on Sundays isn't indicative of the quality of a college football team, in my opinion, because you can have some really good college football teams that only have 1 or 2 guys that might go pro. And then just to the latest point, you can't just look at current commits and recruits and all of that game in college football and assume that, oh, well, this guy's been building this team together, he's going to keep it rolling. Coaches leave all the time, and there's recruits that commit every single year. So just because you get a top recruit doesn't mean you're staying. And again, don't say that we're assuming and act like you're not as well.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And we've seen this happen. We've seen this happen before. I've seen my brother go through the process with Temple University, Steve Adazio, Matt Rule, and all those guys. This has become the new norm in college football. If you think that a number 1 recruit is going to keep Deion from doing what's in Deion's best interest, then I don't know what to tell you. Want to keep the conversation rolling. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from TWSN Studios. Let's talk about the NFL. The NFL apparently is potentially reviewing face mask and illegal hits for review. I just want to get you guys a reaction on that. I feel like this is kind of long overdue because we've seen so many egregious face mask calls this year. We've seen so many roughing the quarterbacks, right, that really aren't roughing the quarterback. So many phantom calls. If you're not going to call it even and all quarterbacks aren't getting the same exact calls, at least you're getting things the opportunity for review. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. My biggest frustration with this whole conversation is there is going to be human error a lot of the time. And I look at my experience. I had the experience of being a basketball ref, at Boys State a couple years ago. And that was the first time I ever, step foot. So maybe I'm, siding with the refs a little bit here, but I think it is important that you do have to review a lot of calls because at the end of the day, these dudes can only see so much. And there is going to be some sort of human error, especially if a play is non-reviewable. So the only downside of this is, man, it's going to be a longer game, man. You're going to stop the flow of the game. And I understand that criticism. But for me, I believe that there is too many calls, especially calls in pivotal moments, to where that call cannot be reviewed. And I think that that's BS. I think that there should be a lot more of these that should be reviewable. And whether they take the game longer or not, it's okay. As long as it's able to be reviewable, maybe you do it just in crucial times. But the fact of the matter is there's plays and there's moments to where even the ref will tell you, hey, well, I missed that. Well, if you're admitting to me that you missed it, but we're not able to review it, what the hell? And what do I get a gain out of it? So I think that it's a serious benefit because I think that there's always going to be human error, especially in, a fast-paced game like the NFL. And I think it's important, especially when there's plays that are non-reviewable. And I think that that's BS because if everybody else can see it, but we're going by the book and it's non-reviewable, I think that that's terrible. But Parker, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's two sides to this for sure because
Yeah.
there's I don't necessarily agree with the well, you don't want to slow the game down. We want to keep I don't agree with that. I think the biggest pro that comes out of this situation is letting referees have more confidence that they can just throw a flag. And
Yep.
then, because I think the replay assist has been very quick. I think it's done a great job of deducing what it's been able to so far. I think that process looks really smooth. I think giving referees kind of that flexibility to throw more flags when it is live, when it maybe could be a bang bang play, then get it reviewed and get out of there. I think that will actually help speed up the game because you won't have these long reviews when stuff is reviewable. It'll just be a series of smaller reviews because again, you're going to get that flag, and before they even get there to announce what the penalty is or if it's under review, it'll already be reviewed because.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's not a realistic expectation to think that the NFL is going to be able to have cameras on every single player in every single moment and catch every single missed call. That's not a realistic view, and B, it's not the NFL you want to watch. To be honest, there's penalties on every single play on a minor level that you're not going to want called every single play. But as far as these bigger ones, I think it just gives referees kind of that liberty in that moment to be like, hey, I'm going to let this flag fly because I know I'm going to get a review. And so I'd rather it's like the fumble thing, right? That everyone loves that they changed that rule. I love it. Where every time there's maybe a fumble, you just let them play it out.
Yes.
You let them go to the end zone. It's a scoring play. Let's review it now. Like I love that change, and I feel like this would be something similar as far as hey, let the ref get the flag out, and then we can review it and move on with our lives. You don't have to have this whole. It's just not going to take up the conversation post game of I can't believe they missed that. I can't believe they missed that face mask. I can't believe they. I think it'll eliminate that and it'll make for a better product. I just don't think it should be. It shouldn't obviously be for every single penalty, but I think you can add reviews for at least all the quote unquote major penalties, the 15-yard penalties that are across the league. I think it's going to be a great addition if it goes through.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think just my final thought on this is it's what you said. It's what is the takeaway after everybody's game? It's never that these games are too long. It's man, my team got screwed over because of that one call, and I'm with you. I think it's such a interesting conversation because I feel like this doesn't get brought up enough in the grand scheme of things. But what you said, the fumble thing, and the fact that hey, they'll rule it a touchdown just so they can go back and review it, and I feel like that's such a big part of every single game because you'll be with fans and you'll be with friends and you'll see they're all pissed off. Oh, no way that's a touchdown. But you know what the thought process is of the ref. They say, hey, it maybe is. Let me just call it a touchdown because I know it's going to go get reviewed. So I'm with you. I think that's a conversation in literally every single game, but that doesn't get brought up enough. And especially if they do this, I think you hit the nail on the head. It will give the refs more confidence. Just let it fly and go review it after. So I think that it's definitely a positive. So
I agree. This review is something that's been coming for a while, I think. Do you think, but before we move on to other things, do you think this will lead to more potential turnover in terms of changes within the rules?
Yes. Within the rules for sure. And I think even this in general, just allowing plays in certain plays to be reviewable that are non-reviewable, I feel like that's where it really lies. Park, what do you think?
I mean, I just don't want to go like the pass interference review system was atrocious. Like that whole just period of time was terrible for football. And I think they learned a lot from that. So I'm not going to advocate for like pushing more in this direction. I'm not disagreeing that they will go in that direction. I hope that they keep doing kind of stuff like this where it's more practical and it really frees the game up opposed to, hey, this is very clearly going to drag the game along. So that's why I love the assist factor, right? Where you're not throwing a challenge flag or you're calling for a review, and then it's the refs on the field. They have to do their little huddle up and talk for 20 minutes about something they figured out in 5. And I love incorporating the assist system. And then I think the next step as far as keeping everything moving, getting more accurate calls is I didn't learn that until this year, but apparently not all the stadiums have the same cameras and camera angles available. And I think, you're only allowed to use certain cameras, certain angles during certain games just for, fairness across the league, which I think is really weird. So I think, incorporating a standard at that front, just that way we can get the same quality of review in every single game. Now, I think it would be the next step moving forward. Making sure we can, all the teams are assisting the league and the referee, like the officiating crews in that process. I think, again, speeds up the game. Make sure you have all the information you need. I don't think there's a lot of rule changes needed. I think we're in a good spot right now. I think there's a couple that you can, go either way on, especially the newer ones. But I think right now they're in a good place. I think it's more just finding a way to let the referees, let the officials have more confidence, let them be able to throw the flags and feel like they're not, just putting their life at risk every time they pull the flag out of their pocket, and then getting to a spot where, we're going to be able to accurately assist, accurately review these things. That'll really help the game move along and go in a good direction, in my opinion.
I agree. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content from our TWSN studios. I want to move on over to the Browns. The owner basically came out and endorsed this regime. He basically came out and he said we have the right pieces in place, but everything else will be reviewed, referring to Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski. And let me just say this. I think Kevin Stefanski is a good football coach. I think Kevin Stefanski is a really good football coach. And so I think that to hear you, the owner, who's usually, I would say, quick to move, to see him go out there and come out in support of a Kevin Stefanski has to feel good. Which brings up the next question. What other critical, I guess, spots on their team are up for review? If you ask me, I think they're looking at one certain guy, and that guy's name is Deshaun Watson. I think that we could really see the Browns move off of a Deshaun Watson this offseason, whether that be via trade, via release. I want to get you guys' thoughts on Haslam endorsing Stefanski and Andrew Berry, and what changes might be coming to the Cleveland Browns. Parker, let's start with you.
I feel like we've seen like kind of a new trend among owners in the NFL as of late, especially it feels like this season and last, where I feel like there's more like PR consideration where they're coming out, they're not saying, oh, I hate this guy or we're moving on from this guy. They're keeping it very general. And I feel like I wouldn't take much that an owner says nowadays. Like I wouldn't say there's a lot of worth to that when they're coming out to the media. Like you can come out and say, oh, we love this organization, we love this staff, we love what we put together, and then you can come out and fire your head coach the next week. Like I don't think it's something that where they feel locked into those comments. It's more something that they feel like, hey, our team's struggling right now. Our fans know there's a lot of stuff going wrong in the building. We know for a fact that there what's actually going on and how that feels. So this is the narrative we're going to try and push. But I wouldn't lean too much into his comments. But I do think everyone around the league, everyone that follows the league, kind of knows the direction these guys are going in, especially like a team like the Browns. It's just a weird situation because I feel like Kevin Stefanski is a head coach that would be able to get another head coaching job if he loses his job this season. I feel like he's one of the better coaches in the league, maybe not necessarily from an X's and O's perspective, but I think he's a great culture builder. I feel like he can get into a program. He could really instill a culture of maybe not, I don't want to say culture of success, but you haven't had that, but kind of a culture of determination. That's what you saw what happened with the Lions, right? Where you get in there and you just get guys bought into the process. I feel like he's able to do that very well. I feel like, obviously the GM situation over there, I can't endorse too highly, has made some very interesting moves over the last 2 years. But again, I think if they go and clean house, I wouldn't be surprised after these comments. There's going to be people that are saying, oh, well, he came out and said XYZ, and I wouldn't be surprised if they still make moves because this is an organization that might just need some change. Kind of like what we talked about with the Steelers last season, where yeah, you've had your intermittent, relative success. You've done some good things. You've done some bad things. Let's kind of reset. We're going to reset at quarterback. We're going to reset at head coach because we are resetting at quarterback. Then we want to reset at GM because this team needs a new identity. It's almost like it feels like they should have done that after they lost like a Bill Callahan, because this
Yes.
offensive line feels like a completely different unit with him gone, and it's been honestly crazy to watch. And so I feel like this whole organization might be on track for a full reset. And him coming out and saying, "Oh, we feel good about what we have in the building." You could feel good about the guys you have and still not want to keep them around. So that's kind of my take. But how are you feeling, Daniel?
Yeah, no, for sure. And Akron Zippy said Stefanski wouldn't get another head coaching job, not in the NFL. I disagree.
That's he's trolling. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, and I think that just when you look at him and what he's accomplished, first off, 2-time Coach of the Year, winner. This dude has won before, and obviously you can say he hasn't won the Super Bowl, he hasn't won deep into the playoffs. I understand that, but I think that this team, like you said, has a lot bigger issues and bigger fish to fry than their head coach being the main problem. Is he, going to be a casualty of the issues and the flaws of this organization? He might be, like you said, because of a much needed bigger change potentially. But when you look at this team, the quarterback is the biggest issue, as well as, like you said, the Bill Callahan thing, I feel like is not being talked about enough. What he did with that offensive line, they got talent in that room right now, but their offensive line looks putrid. They don't know what they got going on. They got talent, but it's just not working. So they're a team who's not losing a lot in free agency. So I'd just be curious to see what the pathway is forward and what's their pathway at quarterback. But all around, I think that this was a total PR move. And whether he believes it or not, Jimmy Haslam, I think that this entire team needs some sort of shift. And whether that is, starting with the quarterback and seeing how that goes next year, I personally think that would be the smart move because I like Kevin Stefanski. I think Stefanski's good. I'm just curious to see what the pathway forward is with the Deshaun Watson. Can you release him? Is that the smart move? And I just don't know if starting Deshaun Watson next year is the smart move. So if I'm the organization and it starts with the GM, who's going to be your quarterback and what's your pathway at quarterback? And let's go from there.
I agree. But I do like to see Jimmy Haslam not dealing his emotions, and regardless, is rooting for the Bengals here. It's good to see a guy not lose his job because he is what's right. There's a reason why Kevin Stefanski is widely regarded around the league, and people are monitoring the Browns situation. So that's why I could say with the utmost sincerity that I believe that guy would be a head coach rather quickly because there are going to be teams. I do wonder though this year, will teams be a little hard pressed to move off their coaches because of the lack of obvious replacements from the coaching from coaching candidates out there. You obviously have the Brian Flores, Bobby Slow, I think hurt himself a little bit this year with that offense, but you have Ben Johnson, he has all these wildly ridiculous demands. You got to ask yourself, who is the ideal target? Who is the realistic target for some of these teams out there? And what are the teams that are going to be looking to hire some of these guys? You got the Jets, obviously, the Bears, right? But who else? Are the Jaguars' job going to come open? Is the Cowboys' job going to come open? Which brings us to our actual next topic. There's a lot of rumblings out there at this time of year, as always, when it comes to head coaching candidates, teams moving on from respective coaches. What jobs do you guys, number one, think are the most attractive? And second, what jobs do you foresee coming open that haven't just yet? Parker, let's start with you.
I want to get ahead of it and say I don't think the Bears job is attractive. I've seen a lot of people talking about Ben Johnson going to Chicago, and I think it's more if you believe in Caleb Williams, and that's an attractive job. But I think there's so much going on with that organization that I wonder. It's kind of like what we've talked about with the Bengals situation, where are you willing to deal with what they do over there, or do you agree with what Ryan Poles is doing over there? Is that something you want to kind of inject yourself into? Because I feel like they're in a weird stage of just their, like the Chicago Bears feel like a perfect candidate for a transitional coach, where it's like, hey, let's get a guy in here for 3 to 5 years, and then we'll move off of him when Caleb's on his second deal, and we'll really get cooking with somebody once we kind of fix this team. But I think a team like Jacksonville would probably be my favorite destination that's opened up so far. I'm trying to just, think really quickly, but I think of the likely candidates, that would be one. Obviously, if the Bengals head coaching position opens up, that's also very enticing with just the offensive firepower you have. You have to come in and know that you have a defense that you're going to have to work to fix, and hopefully get on the same page. And again, it's working with that front office. Do you want to come in, and do you think you can work with those guys, or is this? But I think for me personally, right now, I'm saying I want to be. If I'm a head coach candidate, I want to be in Jacksonville next season.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that that's the most, potentially attractive job. I mean, when you look at these other teams, I just don't know what attractive job is open that's not open now. Obviously, the Cowboys, is that realistic for Mike McCarthy to be gone? I don't think so. And then you look at these other teams, the other obvious spot besides the Bengals is the Miami Dolphins. That's one that a lot of people are saying, oh, McDaniel could be on the hot seat. They would have lost to the Jets, which they went to overtime this past week. People said that caused for McDaniel to be gone now. I think that that's another potential opening that could be interesting, but I truly think that the organization is bought into Mike McDaniel. And I think that when you look at the rest of the jobs, Parker, I think that you said it right. The Jaguars job is the most attractive job if that were to open up. The fact that you got Trevor Lawrence there, and the fact that they still have a very solid roster on the defense side of the ball. And it really seems like they just need a couple more pieces on the offensive trenches. You got Brian Thomas Jr., you got some weapons there. I think that job is definitely attractive. And to be honest, Parker, I think like your conversation about the Bears, I don't know. I think that that's what's going to happen, but I think that would, in my opinion, be bad. I don't know if Caleb Williams in Chicago can survive a transition coach. I don't think so. And that's what concerns me. I think that the Matt Eberflus should have been the transition for this Bears organization, right? I think that, are we going to see a confident Caleb Williams if he goes through 3 seasons of brutal turmoil year over year and they're not making the playoffs? So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? Because I do think that the Bears job is the one that's getting talked about the most. And I think rightfully so, because of Caleb Williams and because of some of the talent that they got, the Rome Odunze, the Jalen Johnsons on defense. But what's your thoughts on that? Because I would be concerned if they brought in a guy for a bridge, because you already start to see like the personality of Caleb Williams. I see this as a potential, cause for ruining a franchise if they mess up this head coaching opportunity this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, and it's all about how you view a transitional head coach, right? I feel like that could be taken in a very negative context, but I personally viewed Zach Taylor as a transitional head coach. It was hey, we're going to get this rookie quarterback in. We're going to get this very high value, what we consider to be elite generational quarterback into our building to try and get this turnaround started. Let's bring in a head coach, and hey, if they click and they work out, we can keep them for the long run. If this ends up working out for us, then we can stick with this guy because obviously it's working. But I don't think there was ever, and I could be wrong, I'm not in the building. But if you bring a Zach Taylor in there, it's really just handcuffing it, saying, hey, if you can't get our star quarterback to work, we're not going to be able to work with you for an extended period of time. That's how you end up, accidentally making the Super Bowl, working your way into the AFC Championship game following that, but then kind of having this fall off that we've seen. I don't think you can pin everything on the head coach, but I think that's why you bring a guy like that in. You don't bring a guy like that in to reshape the direction of your organization. Your organization already knows where you're going. Yep. You're bringing in a guy to facilitate your plan, and a guy that's going to be able to come in and understand that vision and do his best to take your organization closer to that end goal. Again, maybe not for the long term, but he's a guy that you feel confident in to right the ship, kind of get on good terms with some of your bigger stars like a Caleb Williams. Like I felt like even watching, and you can only take so much from it, but watching the Hard Knocks with the Bears, it didn't feel like Caleb really even respected Eberflus. It was kind of like he was in this room with a guy that he was like, I don't know why I'm even talking to you. So if you can get a guy in and get Caleb adjusted to the league and kind of work through some of the weird veteran contracts you're going to have on this team for the next couple of years. That's why I say it's more of a 3 to 5 year process, because you're going to have to work through some roster turnover and keep your quarterback happy while that's going on. And that's why I consider it more of a transitional period, because I don't think you're going to have a coach that's going to be able to survive the next 5 years. So I don't want them to bring in one of these top, like, I would hate to see Ben Johnson go to Chicago, spend the 5 years just trying to, stay afloat and tread water with what this organization is going to have to go through. And then that's kind of the death of his head coaching, career. I think you're bringing a guy that maybe used to be a head coach, maybe has head coaching experience, but has a shorter leash as far as, hey, we're not looking to keep you around for a long time. We just need you to come in and fix some of the issues we're having. And that's why I'm not opposed to whoever they hire being the long-term guy. I just think it is a lot of, hey, come in, keep our generational quarterback happy, keep our team afloat, maybe accidentally win more games than you're supposed to, and then we can kind of move on with what we're trying to do from a front office perspective.
For sure. And one last guy, Brian Dable. I think that's another job that the Giants, it may not be the most attractive because of the failures that they've had, but I think if they do swap out a Brian Dable and a GM for a new GM, I think that if I'm a head coach, I'd be looking at that and saying, hey, that's an opportunity that I truly feel the Giants aren't in a terrible place when it comes to their overall roster construction. You just have to rebuild what you've messed up. And I do think that the pathway forward is there, right? You need a new quarterback and you need somebody to buy in on. I think that the next head coach is going to have their opportunity if it's not Brian Dable. And I just struggle to see right now they got 2 wins on the season. I think there's a real world if they are a top 2 pick where they do move off them.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm excited to see Brian Flores get another shot in the NFL and see where he might land. If you're looking to stabilize your defense, a guy that has had success as a head coach, I think that's a guy. I think some of these guys get bad reps, right? But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's going to be crazy. There's a lot of talented defensive coordinators out there that are just going to probably without a job after this year because maybe they're a part of a failed coaching staff, right? Think about a guy like Mike Zimmer. He could be out on the outs in Dallas because Mike McCarthy might be on the outs in Dallas. And I think that's a guy that, I think if you're a young coach and you're looking to hire a veteran coordinator that could help you and really help you focus essentially on one side of the ball while they can sort of head coach the other side, I think that could make sense for a lot of reasons. Is my thoughts. Make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Park, my man, I want to thank you so much again for joining us for another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show. We kind of switched it up this week. We got fantasy football. You're more than welcome to stay behind if you want to talk some Bengals with us. We're just going to get through this fantasy football discussion with Michael Hara. But you're more than welcome to jump back in for the Bengals talk if you like.
For sure, I'll hang around. I'm always happy to listen to Mike talk, man.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So without further ado, Jimmy, let's bring Mike in here for some fantasy football discussion as we get you all geared up for Thursday night football and for the weekend. What's going on, Mike?
Morning, everyone. How we doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Feels like just a couple days ago I saw you, man. It's funny how that
flies,
works.
man.
Yeah, man. Time flies. But listen, I want to ask you, how'd your fantasy team do this past week? And we want to get to the fantasy football discussion, some of your favorite guys for tonight's matchup. And Daniel, you can take it away after that.
Not a lot of action for me personally this week. All my teams, other than I've only got one team in action, all of them are either knocked out or on bye.
Ooh.
So not a lot. More on bye than knocked out.
Okay.
So
Good.
we're in a good spot. Yeah, we're in a good spot. But so not a whole lot for me to do this week. But happy to help some other people and give some advice.
I love it. So once again, if you guys have any questions, drop them down in the chat below. But let's just start it out. Obviously, you guys can go check Mike's full work at TWSN's website down below. He dropped his fantasy football analysis from this past week on the website. It's up now. You guys can go check it in the description down below. But Mike, talk to us. Let's start off with, some of this past week. What is, 2 biggest things that you learned from this past week of fantasy football?
Yeah, so one thing, you can go check out my full article over at TWSN, but one thing that I noticed, and I could talk about this guy every single week, it's Brian Thomas Jr. This guy is just a budding superstar. I love watching him play every single week. He's now the wide receiver 10 through 14 weeks, and he's pacing to have the 10th best rookie wide receiver season this century. And he had a career day last week. He drew 35% of the targets, 75% of the air yards, both career highs, and he just continues to pop on film. He continues to pop in the box score. His 2.38 yards per out runner is just an incredibly strong mark for a rookie. So once this guy finally gets some legitimate quarterback play with Trevor Lawrence back in the picture next year, I mean, it's going to be wheels up for this guy. I'm just so excited to see what he can do over the next couple of years when it's not McCorkle Jones throwing him the ball.
McCorkle, he brought down.
That's good.
I haven't heard someone say Mac Jones' whole name in a while. McCorkle, that was great.
I missed that name, man. He threw 2 picks this past week, and he still gave Brian Thomas Jr.
One stat I can't give credit to. I can't remember who had it, but I saw online this week. It's Mac Jones on passes 20+ yards down the field. He's 0 for 13 with 2 picks this season. So the deep passing attack is just non-existent with Mac Jones. So once we get those deep balls back from Trevor Lawrence and he's connecting for those splash plays with Brian Thomas Jr., he's going to be reaching pretty high ceilings in fantasy.
For sure. What was your other biggest takeaway, would you say, from this past week? And then we'll get to some start sits for week 15.
Yeah, one for me is just I think we just have to reevaluate who Kyler Murray is as a quarterback. He is just and maybe he bounces back next season, but he just simply is not putting together the rushing production that we've seen in years past. So I just don't think you can put him in that bucket of like true dual threat quarterbacks for fantasy purposes anymore, like the Josh Allens, like the Jalen Hurts, the Lamar Jacksons, because he was, at least from a rushing perspective, was viewed in a similar light as a lot of those guys. But this season he has 7 games with 21 or fewer rushing yards, and he only did that a handful of times in the last couple of years. Last year, coming off of a ACL tear, so he was like very much still recovering from that tear. He only failed to hit that mark 2 times. So it's a pretty steep drop off in terms of his yardage production, and he's not the frame, the type of guy who's going to be punching it in at the goal line like a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen. So you need lofty yardage totals for him to get there in terms of his rushing output, and he's just simply not doing that this season. So I think it's just really time we reevaluate what kind of quarterback we're dealing with here. And he struggled as a passer. He's not putting together the rushing numbers. It's just it's a pretty big nightmare with Kyler Murray this season.
He's got 4 games in the past 6 with under 20 rushing yards. That is abysmal for somebody who's considered that dual threat quarterback. So let's get to some of your starts and sits for this upcoming week. We got 2 questions here. First off, we'll go to our guy, James O'Hare. He said over under Garrett Wilson getting 15 points against the Jaguars. And just talk to us, is the Jaguars matchup a good one for Wilson and Devontae Adams?
Yeah, I haven't closely looked at Garrett Wilson's projections so far for this week, but yeah, this is a smash matchup for any player, any position. If they're a competent player, you can expect them to have a above average day against the Jaguars. Bottom tier rushing defense, bottom tier secondary. This is a spot that players are set up to smash, and it's hard. The volatility between Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson makes it tough week to week. Last week we saw both of them get there because it was Aaron Rodgers' first 300-yard passing day in over 1,000 days. So we saw them both get there, but with the low pass volume, there's a lot of volatility. So it's hard to know which one's going to go off week to week, just because they are both legitimate target earners and they can draw double-digit targets and ice out the other one in any given week. But I would confidently be starting just about anyone from the Jets this week against this defense.
Love it. And another question from Cody Pollitt. Snuck in the playoffs at 6-8. Wow, I wish that was me. 6-8 is crazy. He said, need one in the flex full PPR. Is it Jamison Williams, Malik Neighbors, or Marvin Harrison Jr. this week? Which out of those 3 wide receivers are you taking?
Yeah, for me, it's that's a really close call. I'm personally gonna go Malik Neighbors. It's just it's hard for me to pass up someone who is basically like the expectation is 10 targets a week. Yeah. And it's not a bad matchup this week either. The Baltimore Ravens have really struggled on the back end throughout the season. For most of the season, they were the number 32 passing defense in the NFL. I believe they've come down from that mark in the last couple of weeks. But this has proven to be a pretty favorable matchup. I know we're getting Tommy DeVito, which is just not what you want whatsoever. Tommy pizzas, as Malik would call him, but it's just not great. But when the expectation is 10 targets and you know what kind of playmaker Malik Neighbors can be, that's the guy I'd be going with. You get a lot of target volatility between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jamison Williams. So I would go with the steady option, and you know he has the talent to reach a reasonable ceiling. So I think that floor to ceiling combo is where I'd be going with Malik Neighbors.
Once again, if you guys have any questions, drop them down in the chat below. And the last game that Tommy DeVito played, Neighbors had 9 targets, 6 receptions for 64 yards. So at least that's a solid floor, 12 plus
Exactly.
point. So we got a couple questions here from DeAndre Smith. He said, Njoku or Jonnu Smith? Jonnu Smith's been balling recently. Which tight end are you starting this week?
Yeah, so first off, I'd just keep an eye out on David Njoku's health. Kelsey Conway, Browns beat reporter, said that there's a legitimate chance that he doesn't play this week. So I'd be keeping an eye out for that. But this is a tough and enviable decision to have. Jonnu Smith has been really come on down the stretch, but in the last 2 weeks, David Njoku has 30 targets. That's the most of any player in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. So with Jameis Winston under center, and Cedric Tillman might be back in the mix this week, but with Jameis Winston under center, I think you can be pretty confident that he's going to get peppered with targets. This passing attack is going to be a very favorable offense to target. And David Njoku, it's just hard for me to get away from him. I know that we're seeing a lot of those checkdowns and whatnot go to Jonnu Smith in Miami. And I talked about the Miami offense each of the last 2 weeks in my weekly takeaways column. So go check that out for what I think about that offense overall. But just the volume and talent and what Jameis Winston brings to the table, it's hard for me to pass up. But obviously, if he doesn't play, you're going to be going with Jonnu Smith, and you're going to be feeling pretty comfortable about it.
For sure. We got a couple good questions as well. We got start and sit Jacoby Myers from James O'Hara.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers is one of my more favorite underrated players in the NFL, just from a fantasy perspective and just an overall talent perspective. I think this guy is really a talented player, but when your wagon is hitched to Desmond Ridder, I'm just not thrilled at all, because Jacoby Myers is very much a floor-based play. He's not really going to reach a high ceiling in this offense, and I don't think, while I think he's talented, I don't think he's like the Malik Neighbors kind of talent where he can break off a massive play and get there on his own in a terrible offense. So I'm fading this offense in general. Obviously, you're starting Brock Bowers, but Jacoby Myers, you're really getting there with target volume and just volume in general. So I just don't like that kind of play when I don't think he has the talent to overcome the poor offensive environment.
For sure. And then we got from Jared Gundler at the running back position. Is it Tony Pollard or Isaiah Pacheco? Who are you starting this week?
It's Tony Pollard for me. As much as I hate to say it, first, the Bengals, the defensive line has just generated zero push in the last couple of weeks, just allowing Rico Dowdle to constantly rip off long runs. I believe heading into the fourth quarter of last week, Rico Dowdle was averaging over 7 yards a carry. So this is a defense to attack with running backs. And Tony Pollard has effectively iced out Tajay Spears in this backfield, pushing for a 70% snap share in each of the last couple of weeks with Spears back in action, controlling the vast majority of the touches and the workload in general. And he just straight up looks good. He looks like he's reclaimed his 2022 form in that second to last year with the Cowboys. So I'd be excited about starting Tony Pollard, especially this week against the Bengals.
All right, and give us one more guy. Obviously, we've got Fantasy Football Friday tomorrow. Give us one more guy that you're starting for this upcoming week for fantasy football.
Yeah, another guy from the Cleveland Browns. I know we just talked about David Njoku, but another kind of fringe, grittier guy that it probably isn't even rostered in the most majority of leagues, but I think he is a very viable, if you're starting 3 receivers in a flex, so you could start 4 receivers in that league, or you're starting a handful of receivers. I think you could reasonably start Elijah Moore this week. He just with the passing volume in this offense, he's been able to draw plenty of targets. He's drawn 3 games with at least 8 targets over Jameis Winston's tenure, and he's cleared 16 PPR points in 3 games as well. So he's been productive and drawing volume. And then the matchup this week is phenomenal. The Chiefs have struggled mightily against slot receivers this season. They had Trent McDuffie in the slot in years past. Last season, he was very, very strong in the slot, but they had to bump him out to the outside with L'Jarius Sneed going over to Tennessee. So with Trent McDuffie on the outside, they've been left pretty vulnerable in the slot, and they have allowed the most receptions, targets, yards and PPR points per game to slot receivers this season. And Elijah Moore, the primary slot receiver over the last couple of weeks for the Cleveland Browns, getting peppered with targets by Jameis Winston. And I think this is a matchup that he can take advantage of.
All right, one last question from CG. He said, at the quarterback position, are you starting Sam Darnold or Joe Burrow?
It's Joe Burrow. It's Joe Burrow for sure. Leading the league in basically every passing counting stat, and just putting together ridiculous fantasy weeks each and every week. And I know it's not the most favorable matchup with the Tennessee Titans. They've been able to hold their opposing offenses to pretty modest yardage totals, but I'm still going. It's just a start your studs kind of situation. Like, Joe Burrow has been a fantasy and real life stud this season, and don't overthink the matchup too much.
For sure.
Mike, thank you so much again for joining us for the Sit Down Morning Show, brother. I'm sure you'll be joining us tomorrow for Fantasy Football Friday as one half of the law firm. Excited to have you on, man. Hope that you enjoy the game set. Make sure you guys give Mike a follow on his Twitter, and his social media handles are down below in the description. Mike, we'll see you tomorrow, brother.
Yep. See y'all tomorrow. Have a good one, guys.
Sir. You too, man. That was Mike O'Hara. We appreciate him always. Fantasy football knowledge is definitely second to none. We greatly appreciate him for always popping in on the show and helping out with the fantasy football aspect. I want to move on over to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I want to make sure we bring our guy Parker Blake. I said Parker Black. I said Parker Black. That's crazy. Wow. Parker Blake back in for the discussion, if we can, Jimmy. Did you hear that, Parker?
I mean, there's a lot of things that I could say that I won't say.
Oh, man. All right, man. Well, Parker Black is joining us again on the show.
That's good.
And we're going to make sure we get to our Bengals talk. Listen, man, it's no doubt the Bengals need to change some stuff, obviously, in the offseason. Probably needs to start with how they handle their business, from drafting, being aggressive in trades, and so much more. The question is, will this Bengals front office embrace change? That's going to be the biggest telltale sign. We have your quarterback speaking out. You have people amongst the media, such as us, speaking out, talking about, if this organization wants to be more modern, they have to try and adapt, right? They have to maybe change the philosophy and how they view the interior of the offensive line and the dollars that they actually commit to that. Maybe they have to give someone the actual general manager role and allow them to actually have the autonomy to make significant decisions. Maybe that means they go out there and they start to restructure contracts if that's what it takes to, keep guys in the fold. I do believe that the Bengals are at a crossroads right now with their front office, that something needs to change because the highlight has been placed on the front office. How they do business has been placed on the front office. And if they honestly moving forward want to keep Joe Burrow happy, keep Jamar Chase happy, they probably should listen to these guys. Mm-hmm. They probably should listen to the outcry from members of the media, from members of their local beat, people that cover the team, the fans, right? Because I feel like that's an important part that kind of gets swept under the rug. I tell the fan base over and over again, your voice matters. How you feel matters. They want to put asses in seats. So they're going to listen to the fan base. They want to have a pulse on what's going on with the fan base. So for me, I feel like the front office, the Bengals brass, decision makers, they need to embrace change. Parker, what say you?
Yeah, no, and I think everyone knows where this team needs to go. It's all about the big if they do, and B, which direction they take. And that's I actually just started a project recently. I'm trying to go through the most realistic scenario for someone like in the Bengals front office. Like, how does this offseason look from a not only a cap perspective, like a lot of the offseason simulators you'll see pop up once the season ends or gets near draft season. They pop up. They all operate, within a cap mindset, where I feel like the big conversation for the Bengals is the cash aspect of contracts and how they address that and how they handle themselves there. And so I did some research, tried to collect some information, not necessarily on the Bengals because they're pretty tight-lipped about their books, but I've taken an assumed cash number as well as their cap info rolling into next season, and I've been putting together what I think could be a realistic but still aggressive approach in the offseason, as far as what they could do as far as player acquisition and internal moves and everything around it. And I'm also going to pair a mock draft with it and kind of do a full, like, this is what I do feel like the Bengals could realistically achieve if they were to quote unquote go all in, right? You're not saving your 10 million that you're able to roll over in cap space every year. And that's, I want to make clear, I feel like people think that's just a Bengals thing. There's a lot of teams around the league that work down to that 10 or 9 million remaining in cap space, because that's like the maximum you're able to roll over year to year. So that's why a lot of teams work within that. But when you're in an all-in period, you're in a Super Bowl window period, you don't need to be rolling that cap over. You need to be utilizing that. And so I've actually gone through, I think I've almost wrapped up kind of the free agency moves. I'm going to get into this mock and see if I can get one that feels like it really aligns with the build that I'm going with. But I'm always going to be of the mindset to, you pay your needs, you get those boxes checked off early so you can go into April, you can go into the draft with a BPA mindset. I don't think any team should ever be drafting for need. I think if you're drafting for need, you're drafting to set your franchise back, because if you're drafting for need, that's a player you now need to hit. That's a player that now needs to have success in the NFL. Whereas you want to be in a position on draft day, on draft weekend, to bring in players that you can feel comfortable maybe being a little more raw, a little more on the developmental side, but have that fun upside that could really turn into a contributor for your team. That's where you see teams. I don't think it's really, the scouting goes into it, but I don't think there's a secret sauce as far as defining gems late in the draft. I think it's all situational. I think you're bringing guys into a more low pressure, low stress situation where they're able to take the time to develop and reach that potential and be ready once they hit the field, opposed to bringing in guys that's like, oh no, you need to be a starter for us day one. That's the whole quarterback conversation lately that I've been having for a couple of years now. But you're throwing rookie quarterbacks in day one and then being surprised that they're not succeeding. But that's not realistically going to happen very often. So as far as the Bengals go, I do think it's interesting to consider the options they have available to them in the draft and free agency. But it all comes back to what Bengals fans talk about all the time, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. It's in my mentions all the time. That's a great idea, but the Bengals would never do that. The Bengals would never do that. And so it's kind of getting out of that and breaking that mold and changing that mindset from your fans, because I think in a small market like Cincinnati, and I've talked about it with Jim Irsay and why I love him as an owner, there's a lot of things that he should do differently. But when you're running a small market team, or you're running like kind of the family-owned business style of NFL team, your players and fans have a lot more say than you'll probably ever want to openly admit compared to some of the bigger market teams. So I do think the fans have a voice. I think the players definitely have a voice. I think they're starting to realize that. So they're going in all the right directions, but we'll see. We'll see what happens and what decisions the front office makes.
Yeah. I think that, are they ready to embrace change? They're going to have to be. And I think that this really, and we talked about this on State of the Jungle yesterday, Joe Burrow is putting the pressure on this front office, and there's different types of change, right? I'll get into the free agency and the draft. I think the biggest thing is the retaining of talent, and T. Higgins, I truly believe, is such a massive domino to fall, especially this early. We're not even into the offseason. And the fact that it seems like that domino is pretty much, we kind of know the direction that that's going to go. So, all right, you're going to allocate $25 million. Some T. Higgins is going to be here. So now you start playing around with other factors, right? And I think that that's the biggest change in my opinion. I think if the Bengals would have stuck in their own ways, maybe they don't, budge on a T. Higgins thing, and maybe they kind of just stick to their ways. But I think that Joe Burrow's voice is extremely important in making this organization change. I think the next thing would be looking at the coaching staff and saying, hey, let's see how the next 4 games goes. But when we talk about organizational change, if the Bengals lose 2 out of the next 4 games, if the Bengals lose 3 out of the next 4 games, hell, even if the Bengals lose 1 out of the next 4 games, but mainly if they lose 2 or more, would they be willing to move off of a Zach Taylor? Or would they just go with the status quo. And I think that that's where the biggest change would be when it comes to them sticking with what they know already. So I think it depends on how this, the rest of the season goes. But I think the biggest change is already slowly happening. I just struggle to see the comment that you said, right? That all Bengals fans say, well, the Bengals wouldn't do that. I think that this is a season that is massively, underrated in the fact that this is going to determine the Bengals' future. If they don't listen to what Joe Burrow wants and they say, hey, we're not going to give T. Higgins a long-term contract. If they don't go out there and add to the defense, and let's say, they run it back with Lou or they scapegoat him and they don't add to the defense is going to look the same. That's what's going to happen. If you're going to go add mid-level free agents, lower-level free agents, and let's say you don't even allocate high draft capital in the first round to the defense, you're going to see the same exact story next year. So I'm going to give this front office the benefit of the doubt, and I think that they will this offseason change. And I think we're starting to see the tea leaves of Joe Burrow talking, and I really struggle to see how this organization doesn't change after the season that they just had, and with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase speaking up.
I think you have to expect them to make changes. The question is, will they be significant enough?
Yeah.
There's definitely some conversations obviously being had about what led to this point, what got them to this point, and what's needed to get out of this hole that they're in. I love the question Rage asked. Like, should we focus on more scouts and better position developers since Belichick is off the table? I think everything is still on the table. One victory over the Dallas Cowboys does not save this coaching staff. I think you're in evaluation mode. You're evaluating everything. That being said, you have to ask yourself, if you were to make any significant changes on the coaching staff, is there a clear, obvious upgrade in what they want to come to Cincinnati? Those are real conversations that need to happen. Gary Jellison asks, he says, is there a generational shift brewing in the ownership? Mike versus Katie, etc. versus Elizabeth. I believe Elizabeth, Katie are all already, I would say Katie's already in a more prominent role when it comes to ownership with the Bengals, pretty much running the day-to-day activities. Mike Brown is still, obviously, his voice is still looms very, very large, but I think that power, that shift has already started to take place. Benjamin Mumphrey asked, question for Parker. Could interior offensive line be a higher draft pick this year based on needing cheap long-term solutions in the spot? I'm talking second round.
If you're in reference to the Bengals, I think it's definitely on the table, and it should be. It's all about where they're going to value those guys and where they realistically fall. I feel like with this offensive line class in general, really the meat of it and the top end talent in it, from what I've seen so far, is on the interior, whether that's a tackle flexing in or some of these just guards that are just look like solid players. I think addressing it in the second round should be the move for a majority of teams. However, it'll be interesting to see with some of these teams having pretty significant needs on their interior offensive lines outside of the Bengals. I think a couple of these guys could end up being first round picks, which would be unique for an interior offensive lineman. But I just think the way the class is shaping up, at least my board, I would definitely be eyeing some of these interior guys in the first round. And I don't think the Bengals are in a spot to do that, nor do I think they would do that anyway. I don't think that's a position they value. They like bringing in these tackles and flexing them back inside. And they're okay living in that world of, hey, we'll just kind of make it work on the interior offensive line. I think if you want to address the interior offensive line as the Bengals, you do it in free agency. You don't do it in the draft. I think bringing in talent via the draft would be great. I've been pounding the table for Tyler Booker and a free agency addition. I think that'd be the best way to go. That way you're for sure replacing one of your guards with a talent that you expect to be an upgrade, and then you bring in competition I keep saying you bring in competition for a guy like Volson. Volson will be in a contract year. You let him battle for that job, and if he's able to retain that job, now you have a backup guy, as sixth man, seventh man in your group that you feel like still has a ceiling to reach, a guy that you can still take the time to develop. And if he does win the job, now you know where you stand with Cordell Volson. That drops his value if you do still want to extend him, or it tells you, hey, we need to really overhaul this room again and really finish that off next year in 2026. So I do feel like it's something they could address early, especially the second round. It's just what's going to be available in the second round is the question for me.
So I'm excited to talk draft in the future. Real quick, would you entertain a Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks in round one?
I think the Bengals should definitely be interested in Will Campbell. I don't see Kelvin Banks converting to guard. I know a lot of people talk about him moving inside. I think with his frame and the lack of mobility and flexibility, Kelvin Banks is going to have a hard time dealing with the defensive interior talent in the NFL. Um, Will Campbell, I think, is a better guard than tackle for sure, and I've been saying that for a long time. However, I have concerns with his flexibility. He's in a very tall posture in his stance. He doesn't show great ability to handle bend around the edge. So I'd be interested to see how he fares as a guard, but I do think that's his highest ceiling is on the interior. So if Will Campbell's available to you, I still want to go defensive interior. I think Mason Graham could still be available if the Bengals are picking right around pick
Or
10,
edge.
10 or 11. I love a lot of the edge prospects, though I don't love the top end guys in this class as much as some other people do that will probably be, again, available for the Bengals. I think edge and offensive line is something they look for in round 2. I think you got to be all out for defensive interior because the top end of this class is just so good, and I think it's going to go really quickly. So I think you take a defensive interior guy in the first round or one of these weapons to help your offense out.
Jared Gundler asked, Parker, thoughts on Donovan Jackson in the second round, and DeAndre Smith. I'm going to get to your question as well.
Donovan Jackson's stock has been crazy to watch because you talk to one person and he's, a fringe or even a solid first round pick, even as an interior offensive line guy. Then you have people talking about how he might be even borderline day 3 because he just has issues X, Y, and Z. Personally, Donovan Jackson for me, I think is a solid day 2 pick. That could be end of the second, beginning of the third. I think he will get drafted higher than that. I just feel like he's a lot riskier of a prospect than people are giving him credit for, just because, again, the strength of the class isn't great, especially at the top end. So I think a lot of people are trying to jockey for, hey, this guy's interior offensive line 1. This guy's interior offensive line 1. Hey, this guy's going to move in from tackle and be a top interior offensive line guy in this class. So I think Donovan Jackson won't slip like he should. I think he'll go a little earlier. I think if the Bengals are going to get a Donovan Jackson, it's got to be in the second round. But I don't think I would personally take him there.
Gotcha. And on the question from DeAndre Smith is defensively, do y'all think the problem is scheme or skill? I think it's a little bit of both. I think that Lou has a very complex scheme and a very difficult scheme for offenses, to game plan for when they have the talent. I think right now it's a thing of the talent there's a little bit of a talent gap there, and they're still running the complex scheme, which is why you're seeing the results that you're getting. And that's very, very obvious. And I think that's why the emphasis where people are saying Lou should be fired, I'm like, whoa. The guy is still a good defensive coordinator, just needs players in the building that can run the scheme, because you can't let good players walk out the door and expect the scheme to still run effectively when you didn't do things to replenish some of the guys that you lost. So for me, I think that's a very good question, Smith. I appreciate you for asking that. I think that those are two things that are kind of flying under the radar. I think the Bengals have a good defensive scheme. I just think that having the players to execute is going to be super critical if they're going to get this thing turned around. And let me be clear too. We talk a lot about fixing the defense, but what does that actually look like? This is probably going to be a 2-year rebuild, respectfully. It's probably going to be a 2-year rebuild. You don't just flush the pieces down the toilet without actually having proper replacements and, waiting in the wings, so to speak. This stuff that is going to take free agency and it's going to take the draft. I think something that the Bengals can do to help this defense immediately is add another pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
If you're planning to keep Trey Hendrickson, which you should be planning to keep Trey Hendrickson in the fold, add another pass rusher, right? Add another pass rusher to help, keep this thing afloat, generate more pressure on the quarterback position. Then what you could do is you could add a veteran cornerback. Doesn't mean you has to be the most high-priced guy, but just a guy that maybe didn't work out somewhere, but has talent. Maybe you add 1 or 2 of those guys. Probably just add 1 guy, right? You review the safety position and you say, do you think you can build with Jordan Battle? I think you can. Do you think you could build with Geno Stone? That's up for the front office. That's up for the coaching staff to sort of figure that out. If not, you get someone in there. Ideally, you want a veteran in there, someone that actually has some skin in the game. Luckily for you, there's a guy sitting out there. There's a guy sitting out there named Javon Holland that's going to be available, and you probably have the opportunity to add him, probably for a reasonable style deal too. Then you look at that. All right, so you've added to the defensive line, you've added to the cornerback. you start to feel a little bit good. And then you got to figure out what's going on with the safeties position, if you will. Well, for me, if you hate the linebacker situation, ideally, if you're trying to get more speed linebacker, you're probably not going to look to free agency for that. You're probably going to look to build that through the draft. If you feel like your defense is kind of like struggling to some degree, well, what I would do personally is I'd go out there and I would start to add vets. I mean, not vets. I'm sorry, add rookies at the linebacker position. And then when those contracts start to come center focus, maybe if you develop those guys can step into that role. To me, that's the easiest way, the easiest path to fixing this defense. To me, I'm picking up a veteran edge rusher or I'm drafting an edge rusher, depending on who's on the board. If a Mason Graham is there, my eyes get even wide because then you get the opportunity to pair Mason Graham up with Chris Jenkins, and they played together at Michigan. But for me, I think the Bengals' biggest issue is trying to get more bodies on the quarterback. That's just my thought process. I think that's a quick fix. I think the defensive line is going to be the biggest focus this offseason, and as it should be. I think everything else, you could take it as you will. But I think if you're looking for a philosophy to sort of fix this Bengals defense, that's what I would offer up. I see a lot of people commenting a lot of stuff in the group chat about Miles Murphy. We had players like Miles Murphy, no so good. Sheldon Rankins is a bust. Somebody said, honestly, I feel like our defensive room could be competent if we had a legit pass rush outside. I agree. I think pass rush will always shine if you have, pass rushers that are making life difficult for the quarterback. So I think we're all in agreement here, right? Pass rush is probably an area of focus the Bengals need to focus on this offseason and see if they can do some things to sort of help Trey Hendrickson while also helping the guys in the back end. Because I think the guys in the back end look terrible because of the lack of a pass rush. Yeah. You can hope and pray for guys to develop and do something all you want, but you got to be able to put numbers on the board. And I saw someone say he thinks that, I don't know where the comment went, but it was basically saying that Marion Hobby, there it is. Hobby is hurting the development of Jenkins, Osai, and Murphy. I think Murphy needs to be more consistent, and that's just my thought process. And I think Osai took a while, but he was always going to be a project player. You were always picking him for potential and what he could be. For Jenkins, I think Jenkins showed a lot of flashes, especially for a rookie. That's going to happen, especially on the interior of the defensive line. So Benjamin Mumphrey says Abdul Carter.
Yes.
Daniel, you want to talk about him? I know that's your guy.
Yeah, I think this is the dream, and this is, as we get more into draft season, I'm excited to talk about this. I think for me, when I look at this edge class, it really is Abdul Carter at the highest, and I think this dude is a top 8 talent. I'm taking him, potentially even top 6. I think that there is a drop off, and for me, it's this next group of guys I feel like are solid, but they're not superstars. Like, you got the Nick Scorton of the world, you got James Pierce, you got Shamar Stewart, you got a lot of these guys who are here. And I just think that there's this range of guys, and this depends on where the Bengals pick. I think that when you look at this edge class, Abdul Carter, in my opinion, is just on a whole nother tier, because this dude is an athletic freak. And not only is he an athletic freak, like some of these other guys, that are, Princely from Ole Miss, he has the tools and he's got the film to back it up, right? He's not just a guy who wins around the edge. He's got great hands. He's got great play strength. And even for me, it's also, when I look at edge, I want somebody who can get to the backside runs. I want somebody who's hyper athletic enough to chase down a running back, chase down a quarterback. And this dude also just doesn't give up. I watched that Oregon game, and this dude is constantly in, around the ball. And for me, that's what I want to see out of edge rusher. He's got the athleticism to where I say, hey, he steps onto this Bengals team and he is immediately the most athletic pass rusher the Bengals have, including Trey Hendrickson. And when I look at these other guys, the Nick Scortons, the James Pierce, they're not the most athletic guys. So I think Abdul Carter, for me, and Parker, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I think he's a tier above these guys because of his athleticism and because
he's small, though.
He's small. I understand that, and if you want a bigger guy, that's fine. And it's really the pick of your litter, and it really depends on what you want. For me, a guy like Nick Scorton, 6'5", 280, you can go that route, but he's not hyper athletic. He's not winning a lot with his hands. It's just a lot of strength. So for me, I want an infusion.
It's similar to
of
the Miles Murphy mold, probably.
No, I don't
Nick
think
Scorton?
so.
Nick
Oh,
Scorton?
no, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Nick
yes.
Scorton is similar to
Yes.
Miles Murphy mold. Yeah.
And that's what I'd be concerned of the Bengals going that route. So for me, I think it's Abdul Carter is the only guy I would take, and say, hey, he is the edge rusher. No matter what, I would take him above the rest. You can make a conversation for James Pierce, for all these other edge rushers, because I think they're about the same tier, to be honest.
Grip keeper. Let me say this again. If the Bengals get to 10 losses, you said Coach Lou's got to go. Your words, not mine, Mr. Wright. Let me clarify. That's not what I said. I said if the Bengals get to 10 losses, the entire coaching staff has to go because one person does not bear the blame. Let's be very, very clear about that. If the Bengals get to 10 losses, that means your favorite Zachary Taylor is out of there. Just being very clear about that. Parker, what are your thoughts on the Abdul Carter? I personally think he's just a little too small for his frame. Personally, I just think he'd struggle. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would do well in the AFC North, but I don't know. I feel like the guy's a little small. He gets bullied off the line a little bit too much for my liking.
Well, we'll talk about this from a Bengals perspective, as that's what's highlighted next to my face over here. So we'll keep it just all Bengals. I think defensive line, especially edge, is where kind of my preferences in scouting more align with the Bengals, for better or for worse. Where I just have a hard time seeing these slider framed, maybe more high end athlete guys really translate, especially for the Bengals. I mean, you're getting a guy like Abdul Carter who is going to he's going to thrive in a Micah Parsons, or even, I guess you'd call it now, a Myles Garrett style role, where he's moving around the line. He's able to maybe not pick and choose his matchups, but you're able to kind of get him lined up where you want him. You're able to bring him in exotic pressure looks. You're able to do all these different things with him because he's a versatile athlete. You're not just throwing him on the edge, letting him be an every down edge, rush the passer, stop the run, and just, hey, you need to succeed against this player all game. Abdul Carter is a guy you're going to shift around this line a lot, and you're going to want to try and insert in different looks. And from what I've seen, and one of my biggest gripes with the Bengals, they're not willing to do that. And so you're looking for a guy that's able to be at least a 3-down guy for you on a consistent basis. And I don't think Abdul Carter is that. I think, like Malik said, I think he's going to get bullied off the line. I worry if he even has the length to hang with some of these tackles in the NFL, let alone the AFC North. I mean, if you get him against a DeJuan Jones, it's not only a big frame, but it's a lot of length to deal with. Same with even like an Amarius Mims. Like, I mean, it's you're dealing with a much bigger frame than you have personally, Abdul Carter. And so how is he going to look against that? I don't think he has, shined against those in those matchups at the college level. When he has, it's been guys that are very technically raw and limited athletes in their own right. And so I have Abdul Carter high on my edge board, but I like some of these other guys a lot better. And like Daniel said, one of the things I look for, I don't think it's necessarily an athletic trait, it's more of a want-to thing for me. But I'm looking for these edge guys that, you're able to get after the passer, you're able to win with your hands, but you're also able to chase down plays from the backside, not because you're a crazy athlete, you can just burst there, you can get there, but because you have the motor when they get stuck on the front side, they're making those reads, you're still chasing the play down. And I feel like that's really what the Bengals are lacking right now in their room. And that's why I'm personally a big fan. Like, if I have a whole, column on my grading sheet dedicated to just pure motor. Like, is this a high motor player, a low motor player? Because I think that is a trait that will translate at every position. But the highest motor guys I have on my board right now are Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, Steve Linton out of Texas Tech, and Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Those are three guys that all have a decent frame, two of them more than the other one, but they have the good frame, they have good weight, they have great power, but they also work their hands well. Could they improve their hand fighting? Oh, for sure. But I think they do enough, and they're well-rounded enough where those are the type of guys the Bengals need to be targeting. It's these bigger bodies that can withstand that volume of snaps, that can work in, and they can be a presence on every down. That's why I like a guy like Kenneth Grant. I like Kenneth Grant for the Bengals almost better than Mason Graham, just because I feel like he has every down value and potential. So that's my rant on Bengals defensive line evaluating. But I don't think they're going to like a guy like Abdul Carter. Luckily, I don't think they're going to have the opportunity to get him. So.
No, for sure. And I agree. And I think that just as we'll get more into this draft conversation, there are a lot of edge in this round 1 to round 2 that kind of fit that mold. And like you got a lot of these dudes and they put up production. And you see in a lot of these mock drafts as you enter round 2, you still got 4 or 5, dudes that when you look at, holy shit, this guy, from Boston College, Donovan Ezaraku, he's got 16 sacks on the season. These dudes have put out production. Round 1, I'm just going to be curious. I think you're right. And Nick Scorton is really the guy that fits the Bengals mold round 1. And I think it'll be the Nick Scorton, James Pierce conversation, as well as maybe a Michael Williams. But I think that's what they'll also have their pick of between those guys. And those two dudes, Nick Scorton and James Pierce, extremely productive this season. I think they'll both be available. I think the Bengals will end up picking around like 16th, to be honest.
Benjamin Mumphrey says, Ivan Pace, Nolan Smith, Parsons, athleticism matters more than size. I agree. Athleticism really does matter, especially on the defensive line. But to counteract that point, Ivan Pace isn't an edge rusher. Micah Parsons has dealt with injuries time and time again due to his, smaller stature and size. It's kind of difficult to kind of deal with being a 24/7 rusher, which is why you see him kind of be off to the sideline quite often. That's not just the Bengals game. That's every game with Micah Parsons because it's a lot on him. And for Nolan Smith, that was sort of some of his issues as well. People had when he was coming out, and even when he first got to the Eagles, it was consistency among.
He's not an every down lineman.
Yeah, he's not an every down lineman. He might make plays every now and again. Again, that I think that speaks to our point that it's going to be it's difficult to have those guys in 24/7. And ideally, if you draft spend a premium pick on a guy, that's what you want them to be. But listen, we've been talking Bengals a whole lot. Park, thanks so much for joining us on the show, brother. I hope that you enjoy football tonight. Make sure you guys give Parker Blake a follow. We'll be seeing you back. Wow, we won't be having a show next week because we'll be in Florida next week. But we will be back with you shortly on another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show. Malik Wright, man. I'm excited to talk ball with you again, probably after next week.
For sure. It's always a pleasure, and that works out well for me. I'm leaving for Nashville on Saturday, so I'm going to hit this Titans game and the Browns game. It's time. So,
all right, man. So you're gonna be in Cincinnati?
Yes, sir. I'll be in Cincinnati for the Browns game.
Let's connect when you're in Cincinnati. I'll be back by Thursday, so we'll definitely get together, get dinner or something like that.
For sure. Sounds great to me, man. Always a pleasure to be on here. Always a pleasure to talk ball. I'm looking forward to draft season. You already know that. So
yes, sir, man. Appreciate you. Thanks, Parker Black.
Y'all take it easy.
You take care, brother. Well, we ran over a lot of time today on the show. We'll save the other topics we want to discuss for tomorrow's episode. But Dan, before we get out of here, give us your favorite bets for tonight.
Yeah. So I'll give you guys one for NBA and one for NFL. Once again, you guys can go to our Patreon for our full best bets. The NBA game I'm circling is the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons. My Boston Celtics are taking on a team in the Pistons who they're not so great, but I'm actually looking on the Pistons side of things. Cade Cunningham, he has had 10 plus assists in 5 of his past 6 games and 6 of his past 8 games. In his last match against Celtics, this dude had 14 assists. And when we look at the Boston Celtics, they do allow a ton of assists. And I think it's just the way that they're playing their defense, especially since Kristaps has gotten back in the lineup. You see them doing, a lot of this drop coverage, and it allows for Cade Cunningham. He's been the engine of their offense. So over 8.5 assists for Cade Cunningham is something I absolutely love for today's matchup. And then when I look at Thursday Night Football, it's a divisional matchup, 49ers versus Rams. I have to go with the side that I'm really confident in. And I'm just confident in this Rams passing attack, man. I think that they have been on a roll. I think that they've been consistent. And when you look at every single game this year that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have been together, they've exploded and they've done extremely well. And they look good. And they're coming off of a huge game last week against the Buffalo Bills. So I'm just looking at Matt Stafford, to be honest, over 244 yards. This one, to me, it's a divisional matchup. I don't see the Rams blowing them out. Kyron Williams will probably get 15 to 18 total touches. But besides that, they're going to be throwing the rock. Matt Stafford's going to get 250 passing yards today. And I'm just extremely confident in that. And you get 250 at plus 100. So give me Matt Stafford plus 250. If you want the rest of our bets, go to the description and the QR code right here for our full best bets.
Yeah. Well, there, there's going to be a little bit of a shift here coming soon, where if you do follow our Patreon and our bets and stuff like that, it will be transitioning soonish. We'll have plenty of updates before we do from our Patreon to our actual website. We are coming out with a new TWSN website, which we're really, really pumped and excited about. It's in its final stages. Right now, we're just beta testing it and making sure everything is up to our standards, up to our liking, because anything that we roll out here at TWSN, we want to make sure that it's absolutely perfect. We'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright, as we break through all the discussions of the NFL and get you guys all geared up for this week's action in the NFL, as well as there's going to be some NBA talk. There's a little bit of chatter in NBA circles around Jimmy Butler and LeBron James potentially requesting a trade. So we'll see what that looks like. We hope that you guys join us again tomorrow. We appreciate that you guys make us a part of your daily morning routine and you guys choose to talk sports with us. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, having the conversation, getting into the discussion, and that is the right way. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.
All they ever do is